As if it wasn't exaggerated enough, Sonic for the past 3 years has been on the verge of success, which as a Sonic fan, that is both a blessing and a curse. With the first Sonic film being a commercial box office success as well as its sequel in 2022, to having a return to the modern Sonic we've longed for with the release of Frontiers, to now having 3 back-to-back releases of classic Sonic content, things are certainly looking up for the Blue Furball. I mean, it's to be expected, to be honest, after the amount of mediocrity we've gotten in the past, so it is nice to see Sonic Team fixing their mistakes in an era where Sonic is truly back on his feet, so to speak. And naturally, this leads us into Sonic Superstars, the latest entry to the Sonic franchise and a brand new classic Sonic experience, bringing him back to his 2D roots. As if Sonic Mania didn't do that already, but hey, we just started the video after all. Now, Sonic Superstars for one wasn't a surprise release, nor was it something that I think was unexpected for Sega and Sonic Team to work on. Of course, it was teased earlier this year at a Summer's Games Fest, and a bucket load of marketing months later, here we are now in October with a full-ass game in the palm of our hands. That's a speed run of a release if you ask me, god damn. Though not developed by the team behind Sonic Mania, this time Superstars was developed by a studio named Arcest, who after learning about this studio's existence with one Google search, I learned that these were the same guys who helped develop Balan Wonderworld back in 2021. Now is this a sign or something? I don't know, but this does explain the high contrast and color palette this game presents from the moment you boot it up, bringing in a brand new take on Sonic like never before. Besides, Balan Wonderworld was like a failure from Square Enix's part as they were complete idiots, so I can't really blame the studio that much for the mess that game already was. And speaking of more people that had to leave because of Balan Wonderworld, Naoto Oshima would also return for this project on request of Takashi Iizuka to help with the art style and direction for the game, which is both amazing and also pretty funny for him to do so. I mean, after Yuji Naka being in prison and as well as again Balan Wonderworld's failure, it was nice for the original designer of Sonic to come back and deliver on this brand new Sonic game. And in fact, since we are on the subject of presentation and art direction, I can say that Sonic Superstars does present something truly wonderful for a classic Sonic and the gang here. Colors are bright, the aesthetics bring back the classic era of the games, and Sonic doesn't look as off-brand as he did in Generations or Forces. No, he looks like he looked back in the Sega Genesis games, and I absolutely love that about this one. Sonic and friends are expressive throughout the game as well, the charm of the original games is modernized, and everything just feels so fresh to see for classic Sonic here. I will say though that it can somewhat be stiff at times since this is a 3D game and the expressions wouldn't have the same level of impact as a sprite-based work from the classics or Mania, but besides that, it's still a good first step if anything. And the graphical fidelity is a technical feat for this game too, on all fronts really, since I am playing this on the Nintendo Switch and at first I thought I was gonna be locked at 30 FPS and the PS5 and PC versions would be at 60, but no, all games run with a smooth 60 FPS. Though the Switch version does seem lacking in more of the shadow and visual department since it does look more bland compared to the PS5 version where the graphics do have a better visual flair, but that's more of a preference than it is something needed since again, all games play just fine. Zones and level designs really bring out a wow factor that I think was very fitting to be in a 3D style, almost like this game took notes from Mega Man 11 in terms of visual presentations. Much like that game, it presented that blend between the original style and modernizing it with a brand new look, keeping the integrity of the original game structure while making things fresh for old and new players to enjoy. Sonic Superstars does about the same here, and I definitely appreciate the thought of making sure that classic Sonic is classic Sonic with its gameplay unlike whatever they did back in Sonic Forces. No, it's a modern classic Sonic game that allows you to be like Sonic, and this is greatly expressed through the solid level design and gameplay that also feels like a modern take on the classic style. Similar to Sonic Mania, the zone's level designs are built to allow for something familiar and also unique to stand out, ensuring that you're not bored as you play through the game. Each act has their own gimmicks, traps, enemies, and fun little secrets to collect that almost makes each act feel like their own mini zone, and I absolutely love that. In a way, it demonstrates a world building of the game's setting, which is the North Star Islands here, as we don't just see Sonic and friends go through a jungle with vines to grind on, or a factory that is so bleak and dystopian to even in The Mayan and Aztec temples? Oh, okay, Sonic. I mean, I know you can run fast, but damn, don't go too fast here. But in terms of music though, this is where I can say presentation comes to a little bit of a halt because this was by far the weakest soundtrack I've heard in a Sonic game in a while. It's not bad, but it's not the best work I find for T. Lopes, who helped compose the music for this game, as it didn't really give that satisfying feel like it did with Sonic Mania. And Jun Senoue? I'm sorry, but bro really tried to replicate the feel to the classic games as best as he could, but it just wasn't there for me, man. The notes didn't hit right, and bottom line, it wasn't as appealing as I wish it was. But these things are more like a minor complaint if anything, because the complaints that I do have for this game, well, of course, we'll get to that. With that being said now, there is a lot that I do want to talk about with this rather 4 to 8 hour Sonic game, and for those who haven't experienced this yet now a week into its release, don't worry, I'll put up a spoiler warning of the game's content, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts, well, here's the timestamp to skip to if you want to just learn about the gameplay structure and all that. But let's get started, shall we? Let's see what Sonic Superstars has to offer in its totality, and whether or not this is indeed a Sonic game of all time. Once again, Dr. Robotnik is out to seek his villainous plans as he decides to find something bigger than his ego, as always, in the North Star Islands, a small set of islands that hold a mysterious treasure of sorts that Robotnik wants to obviously have for himself, enlisting the help of both Fang the Sniper and Trip the Sungazer, all to enact his plans. Yeah, Fang the Sniper is back and returns for this game after nearly 20 freaking years of its first debut in Sonic Triple Trouble. Wow, Sega, you better pay him big time. That's just a war crime right there. And Trip, God bless her soul, you guys, because you can see that she doesn't want to help Robotnik at all, but as a native of the land, she's kind of forced to do his bidding. And I love how this is shown in some of the in-game cutscenes we see with her and Fang, or even with the cast members at times. Like seriously, protect her at all costs. Of course, it's not a story without our protagonist arriving to the scene, as catching wind of Robotnik's plans, Sonic and friends naturally stop him from doing so, alongside with some additional help to boot. Because of the nature of the islands, Team Sonic now have the ability to harness these chaos powers that reside within the Chaos Emeralds, giving them far more advantages to take down the threats of the islands. Now, don't ask me how they can just summon a third eye or do some Shadow Clone Jutsu shit, because quite honestly, the game doesn't even bother telling you why they can do it, all for the same reason why there's a 7th Chaos Emerald and not 6 like how it was in Sonic 1. Yeah, I bet you forgot about that little detail there, didn't you? And much like any other classic Sonic game, the gang proceeds through 11 zones, beat up Robotnik a couple of times, head to space to finish the fight, because of course you do, and boom, Robotnik is dealt with and the North Star Islands are saved. At least that is how you would end the game, unless you do the last story mode and it turns out that a demon dragon just shows up out of nowhere to throw hands, and you go Supersonic to stop the threat with Trip sealing it inside, which, to be honest, that shit left me confused more than anything. I mean, it just happens. Besides that, the story is as basic as ever, and honestly, that's much of a praise to this game's presentation, if anything. What I love about the classic Sonic games is that they are straight to the point and don't have to emphasize certain events, because for the most part, these are rather short games. Sure, the 3D ones are also short too, but because of their bigger budget and scale and gameplay design, those would need a narrative to keep things going, but classic Sonic is different. Like, you know what you're getting into and you just appreciate the game for what it ends up being with the gameplay and controls, which is what Sonic Superstars does right in my opinion. The animated cutscenes are also a great visual marvel that hones in on the Oshima art style while making things still fresh for Sonic, something that even I remember loving in Mania and even in Sonic Origins. It shows a new take of classic Sonic that isn't as far removed from his modern counterpart, and it feels like it's truly a younger Sonic going on an adventure before eventually becoming the modern Sonic we know and love today. And the in-between cutscenes, I gotta love the way they try to bring the story together and how the gang interacts with each other on certain occasions, making the adventure feel natural rather than just passing by a zone and then moving on with the next one. Personal favorites were always the ones with Trip, because again, bless her soul on trying to make a bad situation good with all she can do to protect her home, and her having a friendship with Amy is like the sweetest thing ever. But I am still confused about why she can turn into some kind of a dragon towards the end of the game, but hey, much like the Chaos Emeralds, the Demon Dragon from Hell, and the end from Sonic Frontiers randomly showing up in the distance, there's nothing really much I can say at this point. As I've already said, classic Sonic games don't really go out of their way towards creating a larger story or narrative as would a 3D Sonic game, since at the end of the day, it's the gameplay that really matters and makes those games what they are. Like the classic Sonic games before, you can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and now Amy, making this her second official classic debut despite being her, what, 5th time being playable in a 2D game. Like, you know the Sonic Advance games exist after all. In terms of gameplay loop and all that kind of stuff, it's what you already know before, so honestly I'm not going to be stressing about them so much in terms of who you can play and what they can do, because you jump, you run, you can fly with Tails and Knuckles, you can use your hammer with Amy, and you can drop dash like in Sonic Mania and Origins. It's pretty simple and I quite like that. There is also Trip, who after beating the main story, you can unlock her story campaign, making her a fun time like the rest of the cast, but I can't really say much besides that since it's kind of like Knuckles' story in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and instead of Robotnik as a final boss, you face Fang the Sniper instead. And in gameplay, she's one of my favorites because of her abilities, making platforming with her pretty enjoyable for the most part. She's got the double jump by default along with a spin dash and this cool wall climbing ability like Knuckles where she stays in a little ball and rolls around, which makes stage progression easier when it comes down to just speed running through her story just to get to the true final boss. Plus, it is nice to see a brand new character being playable, and honestly I couldn't be more happier about it. Now let's just have her modern counterpart design Sega, because I would love to see it for a future modern Sonic game, you know? But as I said before, this is the same 2D Sonic action you're known to play, and honestly I find it to be a standard at this point. There are some small changes here and there, like how this game has an infinite life system, which you would assume collecting the rings would just be as unnecessary in this game to collect more lives, but really it's more to gain these medals you can collect through each act. Yeah, you get medals. Pretty cool, right? Now, at first I was a little bit confused about what the hell these things even did, but then when entering the hub world as changing his character every now and then, they told me to go to this shop, and here is where you would spend them to create your own Metal Sonic, which is just for multiplayer purposes. Like, listen, I'm not about to go on a tangent about the multiplayer aspect for this game, but it shouldn't be a surprise that there is a local co-op mode and an online play for friends here as what a Mario game would, so I'm not really gonna stress that too much. But the medals as a standard collectible are quite nice, and it does bring a replay value as I now want to go and collect more medals and see how my Metal Sonic OC will look like. Huh, looks like I'm gonna name you Jeffrey. Everybody say hi to Jeffrey. The Chaos Emerald abilities I mentioned also are something that I liked seeing when I remembered they even existed, because while we are back to collecting the Chaos Emeralds to unlock the true final boss and stuff, their abilities here don't really amount to any utility at all. Meaning they're there when you want to use them, but say like the gear system in Mega Man 11, to go back to that comparison, it's not something that is required to progress through the stage. There are moments in regular platforming where they give you the prompt to use them should you want to, and in some cases, especially if you're playing as Trip, you might end up using them more than you want, but again, they're not as emphasized both in story and gameplay, but they are really there to give every Sonic lore theories a big ass headache. Like, I can't even imagine what game theory is going through right now. And the means to collect them are kind of annoying because the special stages for them are these grappling segments where the controls feel a bit clunky and movement is quite limited, but at the very least it's something different compared to what the previous games did. Still, I prefer the Sonic Mania one because let's face it, that one is just better. But I will say this though, while the characters and how they control are fine, the physics is what I think hinders the gameplay style just a little bit, because I gotta be honest, I don't find Sonic and Friends going just as fast in this game. Without the automation portions giving what I think is a fraction of classic Sonic's true speed, I felt like there were this weight to the characters here in terms of their jumps and their movements and animations, unlike how the previous games handled theirs. In Sonic Mania, for example, you felt Sonic was going fast from the moment you started Green Hill Zone and moving your way towards each stage, as the physics largely took the foundation of the Genesis titles and improved it with modern tweaks. This allowed Sonic and Friends to simply just zoom through the stage and have the right sensation of slipperiness that made platforming tight but also fun, and Sonic just running around like he was the fastest thing alive. Here in Superstars, Sonic is running, but I don't feel that kinetic energy that is a Sonic game here, and I think it's because of all the amount of chili dogs that are finally catching up to him at this point. That or the back pain of a middle-aged hedgehog, I don't even know. Bro is now close to 33 years now, so I would not be surprised at all that now is the time that his age is finally showing. The zones in Superstars are also something pretty fun to look back to and witness for a modern 2D Sonic game, as they truly bring out a wow factor regarding classic Sonic's wacky identity, not overstaying too much of their welcome and staying true to the nature of the classic game style. It's unique enough, it's got the momentum to pass through special stages like like I mentioned, to collect the Chaos Emeralds and other goodies, and it's got what you want out of a classic Sonic game, and honestly no complaints there. Some of my favorite zones in this game was Bridge Island Zone, the one that starts the game up, as it kind of reminded me a lot of Seaside Hill from Sonic Heroes. I mean, love that opening scene, and I especially love this one. Speed Jungle Zone was a fun one to cruise through, with the grind rail mechanics from the modern games being implemented in its platforming. I mean, yeah, it doesn't go beyond this zone though, but it's something new and makes this stage more enjoyable and stand out from all the other plenty amount of jungle stages that are out there in Sonic games. And Egg Fortress Zone, the final zone of the game, I especially love the little twists and turns this one had for the layout of the stage, and how it constantly had you on your toes in terms of what was coming at you at every given second, and it even had this fun little laser sequence too. Haha, see, this is how you dodge these lasers, Leon and Ada, so yeah, you better take notes. And for its second act, it was basically the first act but in reverse, which kind of made me laugh a little bit because it just reminded me of the movie Tenet, but hey, you know, it's still pretty cool to just go backwards in a Sonic game of all things. But aside from those, the others were alright. Yeah, out of the 11 zones in this game that you get to play through, only 3 of them were like my genuine favorites, which kind of says something about this game's stage design now that I think about it. Don't get me wrong, the rest of the zones are fun, like I did enjoy Sky Temple and how large of a zone it was for one act, or how Press Factory gave us this bleak glimpse of Robotnik's schemes, but the rest of them were just okay. They weren't bad, but they also weren't great either, visually speaking, and also gameplay wise. And I think part of the problem with this is that Sonic Superstar stage designs are, in my opinion, way too damn gimmicky for my liking. Most of Superstars, you're going to be relying on new tricks up the sleeves of the zone acts, which is neat, but I feel like they don't really enhance the platforming of classic Sonic, as they mostly deter from what makes those games good as they already are. Some are fun, like the grind rail sections of Speed Jungle as mentioned, and the one where you have to explore through Press Factory Act 2 to kind of stop these engines in the background from overheating, but the rest felt either underwhelming or just straight ass annoying. Like, why did they make Golden Capital a literal pinball stage when we already had an entire zone structured around that as its entire gimmick? Who the hell thought it was a good idea to have Cyber Station be filled with these slow ass gimmick transitions followed by a geometry dash like rocket sequence that it just didn't bring any joy out of me. And also, why did they decide that it was a good idea to have the water physics in Lagoon City be so extremely slow, especially when it had that tight ass platforming? Like, no, I'm sorry, but this isn't fun for me. While original and appealing for this game, the zones don't really do much in terms of value of platforming. They're neat stages that bring out the classic Sonic style, which is absolutely amazing, but then when you remember a game like Sonic Mania exists, then honestly I can't really give it much praise. Most of the time, if you don't play as Sonic at least, you can just cheese your way to the end, either with Tails' fly ability, Knuckles' wall climbing and glide, Amy's double jump, or Trip's whole ass arsenal of double jumps and wall climbing. It all kind of undermines the intentions of the platforming itself for each and every stage. And with how the camera is shoved too close to Sonic's ass at times, I also didn't felt like these stages were expansive enough, and sometimes felt so narrow and limited in terms of what I was actually able to do in each of them. With some exceptions, stages resulted in these weird wall panels to the side with some basic platforming to go through, and when the stage gimmicks arrived, it was like a sense of whiplash because you just didn't know it was coming until it was too late. Holy shit. But regardless of those low points, they don't come near the close of irritation and annoyance as the boss fights in this game, because like, what the hell happened here? So like the previous games, each act has their boss fight towards the end, you know, like each with their patterns to pay attention to and then bop them in the head in the end, but my god, are these the slowest bosses I have ever faced in the entirety of Sonic games, period. Unlike those games where you don't have to wait for them to do their little attack as you can just nail them in the head like it's nothing, Sonic Superstars makes each boss very clear that they have these phases to attack before just taking the chance to hit them. Now, some of these are fun for the most part, like I really enjoyed the clown mini boss in Pinball Carnival where you have to hit these little tokens to stagger him before hitting him. The second boss fight in Speed Jungle Zone was very interesting to see as you have to position each character for Robotnik to hit himself with the extendo arm he has for his invention. But the rest just dragged on for minutes on end, making them by far the worst boss encounters by a large large degree. The second half of this game is notorious for that because it's a slog to go through because of the way the bosses were designed, making them feel like a chore that you just have to do rather than something fun and challenging. Like Fang's boss fight in Golden Capital Zone, Jesus, that was too long of a boss encounter with how you had these platforming sections in between each phase and they all took their sweet ass time before moving on with a boss fight, and this happens 3 times. Come on Fang, get a move on already here. The final bosses in both the regular story and trips are also so damn long. No, why did they try to make these bosses longer than they already are when in the past games, yeah, they took long because they were challenging, but they were still simple because of their attack patterns, not having to take their sweet ass time just to hit Sonic. Sure, if you want, you can mitigate the process with the chaos abilities, like use the avatar frame 1 and already you dealt like 75% of the hits, but still, if I had to use these abilities just to cheese a boss fight, it kinda means that these boss fights weren't even designed right. This feeling of dragging things out is what I think is the biggest flaw of Sonic Superstars, because these moments are a huge deal breaker, because when you're breezing through a stage, now you gotta have to have a game of patience and endurance just so you can beat the boss in the end. Like, no, I don't like this at all. Still, at the end of the day though, regardless of everything that I've said so far, the good and the bad points, Sonic Superstars is still a fun time to experience. It's got the fun and thrill of a classic Sonic game now modernized, but it also has some low points that are rather obnoxious that it makes this game feel like it's an expensive ass mobile game that just happens to be on console release. Kinda like Sonic 4 now that I think about it, but a better one I should stress, no doubt. I just wish that some of the new elements of this game were well thought out and actually implemented properly to help Superstar's price of admission be worth it, since you have to remember, this game is worth $60 and I honestly don't think it's worth that kind of money. You see, what I recommend if you want to experience a full classic Sonic game, then just get Sonic Mania. It's half the price of Superstars, and to me the better experience given the nature and craftsmanship that game has compared to Superstars in terms of level design, controls, physics, and that classic Sonic charm. But if you really want to play this game, then just wait until the holiday season honestly, because given that we're just about a month away from your Black Friday deals, you know Sega is gonna price drop this game all to ensure it gets some good mileage until you know the next foreseeable Sonic game happens to show up. And that's just kind of the way it is sometimes with this franchise, you know, but hey, it is what it is. And that right there is a wrap on Sonic Superstars. And listen, I had my fun with this game. Like, it is a good game, a very fun Sonic game, no doubt about that, 120%. But I still would not recommend buying it right now, as I've said, in terms of everything else it has. But hey, unless you're like a huge Sonic fan, then you know what? More power to you, I guess. Go buy like 20 copies of that or something, I don't know. But the next time I ever decide to jump back into Sonic, now that we are talking about him and wrapping things up here, probably I'll go back and talk more about the GBA games, because I know there's Sonic Battle that I still want to talk about, especially since we've done the Advanced Trilogy, and maybe we'll go back to the actual classics with Sonic 1 on the Sega Genesis and move our way up from there. But also seeing that we got Mega Man X8 to deal with, the last one there is of the entire Mega Man X marathon, that's probably going to be the next video of sorts. And hey, since we are now 5,000 subscribers, by the way, thank you guys so much for that. Like, you know, it really means a lot for you guys to be watching the content and things like that. And I did say on Twitter at least that I would do a Ace Attorney trilogy review once I'd hit 5,000, and since we're now here, expect that in the near future, I guess, because granted, that's going to take a lot of time. It's 3 games in the bunch, but like I'm a huge Capcom fan, so I think I'm going to have a really fun time with that one. But that being said, if you already bought Sonic Superstars, go enjoy that game. If you haven't already, you already know what I said, and you know, I'll see you all with that next video, of course. Also, f*** you, Fang the Sniper. I don't like you at all.